gamer that I've ever known in terms of, especially in terms of StarCraft, but just of all time. He had this ability to just decide to be good. There was no bullshit. There was no excuse. There was I remember asking him in 2001, like, God, how do you play that fast? And he said, well, I saw a video of some Korean guy, Choja, and I thought, I can play that fast. So I just kept playing until I could. And I was like, oh my God. So this is like 3 years later, and, you know, I would chat with him, and he would watch some replay of, like, Boxer or Nada playing brilliantly. And he'd watch it and be like, God, he made so many mistakes. That guy sucks. I'm going to play better than he does. And then he would play a game, and I would observe, and he would play better than Nada. And he would just do it, right? And eventually when I you know, started meeting and, like, landing with him and hanging out with him in college, he would just focus so intensely, and he did all these crazy things, like he would turn his air conditioning really high so it'd be freezing, and then turn the heat on in practice, and he'd practice with his chair at different heights, and he'd practice with shoes on, with shoes off. He'd practice when he was tired. He'd practice after he had a lot of rest, before meals, after meals. He would vary up this schedule so much so that way he would be prepared for anything. And he was always so confident in himself. He just always believed in himself, and anytime he lost, he would blame it on himself and be like, God, I suck. I need to get better. You know, it was a little overly harsh, but I mean, like, he just improved at such a phenomenal rate. So I was terrified that when I actually got to WCG 2004 finals, that he was in my bracket, right? It was this weird thing, because, I mean, I just told you that there were 20 qualifiers everywhere. Well, one of them didn't get announced till 3 days beforehand. So there was this guy, there was actually this kid, he was like 11. He went to the Las Vegas qualifier, he was the only one who went there, so he qualified. And I remember I was in the hotel with Artosis, and this little guy comes up, he's like, are you for the StarCraft tournament? And we're like, yeah, man, yeah. And Artosis goes, did you qualify from Las Vegas? And he was like, yeah. And Artosis is like, that's awesome, man. And the kid goes, did you know that there's a strategy where you can drop vultures by their workers and kill them off? And we were just like, oh my God, that is the sweetest thing that I have ever heard in my entire life. This little kid who qualified in Las Vegas is now at like a finals tournament with a pretty robust scene at the moment. And Artosis and I were like, man, that is awesome. And then we like left, and Artosis is like, God, I hope I'm in his bracket. And I'm like, me too. Like ruthless competitors. But, like, so, you know, they did a random seeding. And in the brackets, it was, like, Artosis and, like, the bottom half in terms of the skill bracket. And in my bracket was all, like, the terrifying names that I was just praying to God I wouldn't have to face against. You know, there was Evade was there. I should have the list. Skew, Wreckroll, Froz, Sadist. Like, really good players at the time. I remember my first game, I just botched it. And I barely won against Evade 2-1. And, you know, it's that tournament. I called my brother so many times in that tournament. He didn't qualify for it, but I called him between every games, and he kept calling to check up on me. Oh, God, it's like, it even makes me emotional, like how supportive he's just always been of me, just like my whole family. And I remember I would, like, call him before games. I'd be like, dude, I got to play Evade. He's like, dude, you've been practicing. You got this. You know you're better. Just stick to what you've been practicing. You understand this game, man. You get it, you know. He's just here for fun, but you're going to be here for the win, right? And I played and I won, and then I was up against Froz, and I was just terrified. But I got the chance to choose my map first. I choose my best map. Core Hall of Ceres. I have a well-practiced strategy. Froz demolishes me on it. The game isn't even close. And I called up my brother in between those games, and I was like, man, I'm in this bracket of death, man. There's no way I can make it. I'm down 0-1 to Froz. And Nick said, no, Sean. It's a bracket of death because there's people like you in this. You've beaten Froz all the time online. You got this, man. And the next map was Gorky Island. And if any of you look at that map, it is horrendous for Zerg vs. Terran. Just look at it and you'll be like, ugh. You know, it's an island map. It's very awkwardly positioned. But I practiced it really hard. I stuck to my guns, played a dramatic game, and ended up winning. And then I felt really focused. I was calm. I'd stopped sweating, and I just got in the zone. And in that third game, it was on Martian Cross. I was scouting with my first Overlord, and he sniped it with Marines. And I was just like, oh, God. And then I just sent a scouting drone in there. I was just like, well, I don't know what he's doing. And I got into his base, and I saw that he was early expanding. And at that point in time, early expanding against Zerg was still a very unorthodox thing to do. Players still primarily one-based as Terran against Zerg, but he was early expanding. And all of a sudden, in my head, I went, I know exactly what I need to do to win. And I did a transition that I actually still use today. I expanded a bunch. I opened Mutalisks to harass, transitioned into Lurkers, got the Hive, then transitioned into Guardians, followed by Ultralisks. When his first push came out, I had 12 Guardians that demolished the whole thing and just kept rallying Ultralisks until I won 2-1. And it was insane because I won, and when I looked up, no other games were being played in the tournament. It was just Froz and I at opposite computers, and everyone else was crowded around, and I just was like, oh my god, I had no idea that there were that many people there, and it was just such a rush, and Froz shook my hand, well, mannerly. And I called my brother, and I was like, Nick, I beat Froz. And he's like, dude, I knew you could do it. Now you're playing against Sadis, and that guy's probably pissing in his pants because you just knocked out the best Terran in America. And I was just like, oh my god. And I beat Sadis 2-0, and I was in the top 3, which meant I was qualifying ever for my first ever Grand Finals. And I remember I actually played Artosis in the winner's bracket finals. So he was top 3 as well. And you will never have seen a happier man than Artosis. I seriously, like, I sat down, and he's like, hey man, he said, you want to play a best of 1? I don't even care if I get, first or second. I mean, we're all going, man. And I was like, let's just play a best of 3. I'm feeling good. He's like, cool, man. Oh god, this feels so good. And I remember in those games I was sitting there playing, and I leaned over because he was playing across from me. Our monitors were facing each other, so if I leaned over I could see him. And in the middle of a game, I just looked over, and he was just beaming. He was just beaming. It was so cool because it's like a moment, where it's like, I know exactly, because I knew Artosis had been practicing. It's like I know exactly how hard this guy has been training for this tournament. And I know how hard I've been training for this tournament, man. And it, like, paid off. And so Froz came back through the winner's bracket. He actually won the whole tournament. He just, like, he had to beat me, like, in 2 best of 3s, and he did that handily. He beat me, like, 5-1 and however many games I ended up playing after that. So Froz won the whole tournament. But, it was me, Artosis, and Froz going, and it was, like, my first ever World Cyber Games USA qualifier that I qualified for the Grand Final. And I was just like, oh my god, I, like, called my mom. And this is, I'd part say it's what happens when you have a mom who is just around 2 StarCraft players. But more importantly, what happens when you just have a really kind mom who just supports you. Because I called her and I said, Mom, I did it. I'm in the top 3. And I beat Froz to do it. And she said, Sean, you beat Froz? Oh my god, because Froz had gone to the Grand Finals. He beat Boxer twice in 2002 in a group of death. I mean, just an epic player. And it was just so nice. And then, I went to the Grand Finals, and I practiced more for that. And, in between that period of time, I learned another, I think, key thing in terms of my mindset as a player, that Zerg vs. Terran was my good matchup. Actually, as you're going to hear, my Zerg vs. Protoss has actually been really lackluster until about 2007. I think was the first year I was actually like, hey, I'm confident in this. But it was just Zerg vs. Terran that I really got. And, right around the time of those finals, especially leading up to the Grand Finals, it occurred to me that I really should not ever be worrying about the player, or who the player is, or what the player is capable of, or who he's beaten in the past, or what his rank is, what anything is. If he is Terran, Terran has constraints that any Terran cannot overcome. And that means that if I practice against Terran, it doesn't matter what name behind that, what the name of that player is, or who that player is, because I know how to beat Terran. And I just studied how Terran worked, and I came across that key timing, where after the Zerg gets Lurkers, you can make a ton of drones, because the Terran player cannot move out until he has a science vessel. It seems totally intuitive now, because you watch the pro matches, and